Welcome, today I will be starting a new what if Deku had all for one and was betrayed. Like usual, Deku is born to Inko Midoriya and lives the exact same life as he did usually until his 4th birthday. On his 4th birthday, Deku had woken up with a strange white patch in his hair, which slowly started to spread as the day went on. Despite it being his birthday, Deku still had to go to school, but when he hugged his mother to say goodbye, he felt a warm feeling enter through his arm to his chest. But the feeling settled down not long after. Thinking it was nothing, Deku continued his day like usual, going to school. When he got to school, Deku was questioned on what his quirk was since it was his 4th birthday and he was due to get a quirk any day now. Hearing this, Deku just smiled, stating that he is going to see the quirk doctor after school, to find out. He then wonders what his quirk will be, maybe a quirk like his father, fire breath, attempted to breathe flames, but nothing came out. Then trying the same movements as his mother would when using her quirk, managing to pull an All Might figure from his bag. Seeing this, the class assumed that his quirk is the ability to attract small objects towards himself. While messing around with his quirk, Deku accidentally made contact with a few members of his class, feeling that strange sensation again, now being able to use a few more weak abilities. Shocking the class again, with them praising him, telling him he would be a great hero with his quirks, but Bakugo butts in saying that no matter what quirk Deku has, it will never be better than his. Making a small explosion in the palms of his hands, drawing everyone's attention to him, smirking. After school, Deku and Inko go to the quirk doctor to identify what his quirk is, with his hair nearly being completely white by now, only having a few sprinkles of green mixed in. At the doctor's, the quirk doctor, Dr. Garaki, smirks in his chair while looking at the results, telling the boy's mother he definitely has a quirk, a very powerful one. But he will need to do more tests to identify it. Happy for her son to partake in the test, Deku has an MRI done, blood samples taken as well as other basic tests done. The doctor also secretly has a DNA test done on the boy, certain on who the father working in America is, then making a call to an ominous man. The voice demands for the boy's quirk to be removed. However, the doctor explains that he already tried, but the quirk factor protects it from being stolen. Irritated, the voice says that if he can't get rid of the boy, he will have to slowly manipulate him to do his bidding, showing him the truth of this cruel world. After all the tests are done, Deku asks the doctor if he knows what the quirk is, with the doctor replying that its name is All for One. Hearing this, Deku asks if it is powerful and if he could be a hero with it, just like All Might. The doctor smirks once again, explaining that his quirk isn't the type that people would consider heroic, however it is powerful. Confused, his mother asks what he means, asking if there is a problem with her son. Reacting, the doctor flips through some notes, reassuring the scared mother that nothing is wrong with her son. However, his quirk is the ability to give and take someone's quirk if they are extremely close range or making contact with his hands. Explaining it as attracting the quirk factor of others into his own body. Hearing this, Deku mutters, Bakugo says that only villains steal, does that make him a villain, now crying a tsunami? Hearing this, his mother tries to reassure him that he could still become a hero, however inside her head, she realized why she couldn't use her quirk ever since this morning. She originally thought that it was just because she was tired or maybe missing something in her diet, or maybe a health problem like an illness, however in reality, her 4-year-old son had ripped it from her body without knowing, a thought that scared her to her core. The next day, Deku isolates himself in class, having heard rumors that members of his class had recently not been able to use their quirks. Realizing it was his fault and if they found out they would hate him. Noticing Deku was feeling down, Bakugo came over to cheer him up in his own way, putting his hand on Deku's shoulder, saying, "Let me guess, your quirk was trash, that's why you are feeling bad." But Deku remained quiet, moving so Bakugo was no longer making contact with him. Realizing Deku was avoiding him, Bakugo grabbed Deku's arm, creating a small explosion, firing it, yelling, "Who gave you the right to ignore me?" However, Deku just looked Bakugo in the eyes, now crying, and whispers, "I wish I never had a quirk." Bakugo asks what he means by that, taking a step back. But Deku just replied, "Only villains steal, you told me that." Confused as how those statements link together, Bakugo just smiled, stating he was right, only villains steal, which only made Deku cry even more. After about a week, the class finally discover what Deku's quirk was, and start bullying him, starting with stealing his belongings, and vandalizing them, all the way to physical violence. This continued for a while, with Deku believing it was his punishment for being a villain, until one day, Deku was hit quite hard and started to bleed. and on instincts he pulled on the air to try catch himself from falling. However, he grabbed hold of two of the children's faces, sealing their quirks as well as all the people standing within half a meter of him. This motion, as it was done in self-defense, was more aggressive than how he previously took quirks, so instead of it feeling like a gentle warm feeling leaving their bodies, it felt like their organs and soul were being ripped out from the inside, causing their bodies to contort and have severe seizures and screamed in agony. Realizing what he had done, now even more scared of his own power, Deku ran from his kindergarten into the forest and got lost. Luckily he was found by a hero, but because of how dark it was at that time as hours had already passed, Deku instinctually grabbed the hero's hand, ripping his quirk out, giving him minor super speed. Using this, Deku runs off after checking the hero's pulse, running into a dark tunnel full of villains who were in the middle of mugging someone. Noticing the boy, the villains decide to try take him hostage, charging at Deku with their blade and gun quirks. But Deku easily steals their quirk after they got close to him, leaving them contorting in pain as their quirks are ripped from them and their bodies reform. Seeing this, the last villain uses his quirk to release a poisonous plume of smoky gas which makes Deku get a migraine and start to feel lightheaded, and collapses to the ground. When he wakes up, he is in a hospital bed, with his mother crying by his side. Confused, Deku asks his mother what had happened the day prior, with her explaining that after running away from school, he was found in a bloody pile, in an alleyway, covered in stab wounds. And if he was found any later, he probably wouldn't have survived. Still not remembering what had happened clearly, he decides to go back to sleep. After being suspended from school for 2 weeks following his actions, his classmates demand for their quirks back, continuing to bully him. Wanting to give their quirks back, Deku puts his hand on one of their heads, trying to push his quirk through his arm, back into his body. However, he accidentally forced all his quirks into the boy, making him drop to the floor, brain dead, spitting out saliva and blood. Wanting to reverse what he had done, he takes the quirks back. However, the damage was already done, and he didn't wake up again. This memory scared Deku into not returning anyone's quirk or making contact with anyone ever again. Now at the age of around 10, the bullying had gotten a lot worse, regularly coming home, covered in bruises and blood, only to see his mother slumped over the sofa crying, having spent her whole day trying and failing to remove the graffiti covering their house, saying words like villain, monster, thief, and demon. Not wanting to disturb his mother's life anymore, Deku decided to pack his things and leave his home, only bringing an All Might hoodie and figure as it gave him hope that he too could become a great hero. While on the street, Deku made himself a house made of rubbish on Dagobah Beach, using the transport of rubbish to train and build muscle. The conditions living in the landfill were horrible, as he nearly froze to death multiple times in the winter, even while using a fire quirk. Due to these conditions and a quirk called Adapt, by the time he was 11, Deku could no longer feel any pain, unless it was a stab wound or worse. He was also attacked by many villains in his sleep, stealing their quirks, gaining many strength and speed enhancers, mixing them together to make even stronger quirks. He still went to school in this time and was bullied for what he was and his living conditions. However, by this point he visibly felt nothing, so it didn't affect him too much. Around this time, Deku also became a vigilante of sorts, being known as the Monster Oni, who would appear from the shadows and beat up villains, stealing their quirks and nearly their lives. Due to this, he gained many new quirks and got even stronger, such as a sedation quirk known as chloroform from a child abductor, an invisibility quirk from a creepy old man who liked to admire idols in their private times, a super hearing quirk, infrared vision quirk, night vision quirk, and an X-ray vision quirk from a villain group which specializes on scouting potential locations before raiding them. He also got a mind control quirk from an old man with greasy hair, bloodshot eyes, and wearing rags, after he had used it on a little girl to persuade her to alleviate his stress with her body. Luckily Deku had arrived just before she could start beating the man to a pulp, leaving him so disfigured that he couldn't even be recognizable. After testing the quirk out for a while, Deku realized the quirk needs some level of trust between the user and victim, theorizing that the previous user probably offered food or sweets to vulnerable people to gain their trust to activate his quirk. He also got an intelligence quirk from the leader of a criminal organization after following the gang up their food chain to the boss. After stealing the quirk, he could feel his brain reshape, feeling like he had always been in the dark, only just turning on the lights for the first time. After analyzing the quirk for a few minutes, he realized the quirk just tripled the user's birth IQ, meaning the original user was probably stupid without his quirk. With this new quirk, Deku was able to better organize his attacks on villains, increasing the amount of quirks he was capable of stealing. Okay guys, this is the end of the first part. If you enjoyed, please consider dropping a like and subscribing. With that out of the way, this is Demonic Saiyan saying bye.